Hello and welcome to Building Digital Solutions with Yalantis. My name is Victor Asachi, and together with our special guest today, I'll lead you through the topic of scaling through open banking API services. At Yalantis, we help businesses to bridge tech leadership and tech talent gaps with modern technology and software development practices, so you could scale, innovate, monetize in products and solutions. Today, I invite you to explore the world of creating secure API services for scaling and improving your business with David Biesack, the Chief API Officer at Apiture. Hello, David, and welcome to Building Digital Solutions with Yalantis.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have your knowledge and the information you're about to provide. I'm definitely sure it's going to be booming. So let's start with the intro then. If you don't mind, please tell us about yourself, about your company, and your position.
Sure. So I'm David Biesack. I'm Chief, as you said, Chief API Officer at Apiture. Apiture is a software as a service provider for digital banking in the United States. So we run online and mobile banking applications and back office banking application support for several hundred small community banks and credit unions in the United States. So these smaller banks serve smaller communities, and they don't have large IT staffs to manage their online banking infrastructure, et cetera. So we do that for them, and we provide a online web application for their customers to do online banking, and as well as mobile applications. We're an API first company, so we design APIs to support all the digital banking capabilities that we then put into those applications. So I joined the company to build that API program when the company was founded in 2017. So we've been in practice for about 6.5 years. But Apiture was formed as a joint venture from two other companies. So we actually have a legacy in the industry that goes back about 24 years. So we have quite a robust feature set for both personal and business banking. And we strive on innovation and providing value to our customers, both the banks and credit unions, who are actually our first level customers, and then their banking customers as well, to give them a better banking experience and help them manage their money and to succeed financially.
That's great. That's great. What an amazing background. Thank you so much for answering that question. Well, let's start with the very first one. Let's talk about Open Banking API and Open Banking as a concept, why it is important, how it is significant to the fintech industry.
Sure. So there's actually two different definitions of what open banking is. So in the European Union and like UK especially, open banking is sort of an emerging standard that banks in the EU are starting to follow in order to provide integration and interoperability between financial institutions, allow customers to have direct access to their data. And part of regulations within the EU are satisfied via an open banking initiative. In the United States, it's more of a general concept. Open banking is really providing access to the banking information and capabilities and feature set through open APIs. At Apiture, we develop our APIs using OpenAPI 3.1, 3.0 format to publish RESTful APIs that then provide accessibility. And the purpose of having an open banking framework basically is to allow innovation and allow growth of the banking platform. So by providing APIs, you can have vendors and third parties and other fintech companies integrate with the banking platform. And it goes both ways. A lot of the partners that we work with and integrate with provide APIs, and that allows us to integrate with them much faster and with a higher degree of security, et cetera, compared to traditional integrations, which had been done with screen scraping and less secure or more fragile integration technologies. So open banking is really about opening up the environment to allow innovation, allow fintechs to work together to solve customer problems, to create solutions that then attract customers and allow those businesses, those financial institutions to grow. And that's what we provide through our open banking interface and the Apiture digital banking platform.
That's amazing. All right. Well, you've already mentioned the APIs. So if you don't mind, would you explain the role of the APIs in facilitating open banking initiatives?
Sure. So I like to say that API is the first word in Apiture. That it is basically the inspiration for the company name. When the company was founded, our goal was to kind of establish APIs as a primary part of our platform. And so web APIs basically provide a standard mechanism that sit on top of primarily HTTP. All of our APIs sit on top of the HTTP protocol. And by doing so, we're taking advantage of domain knowledge that most people will have. So most other companies that provide web APIs use HTTP protocol, and Open API is really the best way to describe or define what your APIs are. And that's a standard mechanism for getting them. And we use JSON for all of our data request and response bodies, et cetera. So by employing industry standards like Open API, JSON schema, et cetera, we give a leg up to developers who want to be able to integrate with us through these APIs. What we do is do domain-driven design and analysis to identify what are the capabilities we want to expose, and we look at resources within the banking environment that customers are going to want to integrate with. When I talk about customers here, I'm talking about developer customers, fintechs, and other partners. So we have an API for looking at a customer's accounts. We have APIs for looking at or creating transfers. We have APIs for looking at your account transaction history. And we have administrative APIs as well that allow the financial institution themselves, if they want to build back office applications that can then look at what's going on within their environment. So they can look at all the banking interactions and other activity that's going on. How many customers have logged in today? How many customers have scheduled transfers, et cetera? Downloading their statements, whatever it is that they need to do to achieve their personal goals with the bank. So all of this is driven by APIs, which allow us to and allow the partners to build different sorts of integrations, whether they're building a back office application or they're trying to integrate banking into an existing front end application that runs on the web. So you can use JavaScript in the browser, for example, to call into these APIs. And we also have other products which allow us to create what are called embedded components. So these are small UI widgets that a third party can integrate into their own application. So say it's a university that provides a portal for students and faculty and staff at the university to look at your schedules and plan your curriculum, et cetera, whatever it is you want to do within a university. But if you want to integrate in a banking component so that you can look at your bank accounts and then be able to schedule a tuition payment or something like that, have that integrated naturally into the hosting application. So we provide these components that allow you to embed banking into other applications to give a more natural experience to those people so they don't have to switch context. They don't have to switch from whatever application is that they're currently using and then switch over to their bank application and lose that context. So, and that's driven by APIs as well. So all those components are built on top of our open APIs that provide access to your accounts and balances and transfers, et cetera.
Amazing. A lot of potential, not only for the user experience, but as you mentioned, the administrative APIs, I guess for fraud prevention and for security measures, right?
Yes, definitely.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, I'm actually amazed about, I'm sure that you just started talking about the possibilities of APIs, but I was wondering if you could share any kind of experience you've used APIs for scaling banking services, fintech services.
Okay, that's a great question. So scaling there's a lot of different ways to address what we talk about with scaling. But for example, I mentioned these administrative APIs and banking activity. So within part of our platform, we have a a banking event history API, which is an administrative type application, which basically gives a history of all of the banking activities that all the customers at the financial institution have performed over time. And that allows the third party or the bank itself to look at that banking history. And you mentioned fraud, for example. We partner with a company called Defense Storm. And they can basically look at this event history and try to identify if there's potential fraud going on by finding abnormal or unexpected transaction activity or other banking activity. So they can consume this event history that looks at everything that's happened at the bank within the last hour or 2 hours or whatever interval they choose, fetch all that data, and then they can perform analysis of that to look for fraud. And then they can then alert the financial institution that says, hey, there's some suspected fraud here with this particular customer. It looks like maybe someone has stolen their debit card, for example. We can look for that, or try to do an account takeover attack. Maybe they've got access to the customer's account and they've submitted a address change request and then asked for a new debit card to be sent to their new address. So they can look for that type of fraud activity by exploring this banking history through these APIs as well. The APIs also provide ways to call back into the bank through the rest of the APIs. So if you're looking at account history and you see transfers that have occurred, then you can also then call into the APIs to get additional detail about that account, about that transfer, and other information that you need in order to find out more. We try to keep the events kind of small because there's many of them that occur. And so you keep the event payload relatively small. And if you need to call back to get more data, then you can do that through the APIs as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really great approach because you may just need some kind of a specific set of information instead of going through whole of the history to determine some kind of suspicious events. And as you already mentioned, there might be considerations and challenges, right? In this particular point of integrating API in the fintech infrastructure. Do you mind if we just focus on those for a bit? What would be the key consideration we should focus on?
Well, certainly the most important aspect is going to be security. We take security very, very seriously. When I joined the company, the first thing that I did was basically establish a set of API design principles, which would guide the design and development of our APIs. And security has always been at the forefront of what we do in APIs. So we use OpenID Connect as an OAuth 2 as the principal mechanism by which customers then authenticate against the bank, against the financial institution. And that provides a higher level of security. So all the API calls then require an access token. So we have an authenticated user. And if there's any kind of suspicious activity, we can invalidate tokens. We can basically shut down that access. And those tokens expire and stuff. So providing secure access is the primary thing. We always have valid security for the API calls. And then on the back end, you also have to worry about things like entitlements. Who has access to what particular data? And so we manage that. And as I said earlier, Apiture is a very mature platform. It's been around for quite a while. So we have a very robust entitlements engine as to who has access to what accounts. So when you log in, you can only list the accounts that you actually have access to based on who opened the account and who granted particular access to an account and what you're allowed to do with that account. So we have management entitlements to say, okay, you have access to this account, but all you can do is you can look at the account. You can see the balance, but you can't actually transfer money to or from that account. But then we have additional entitlements to be able to transfer to or transfer from that account or manage debit cards, et cetera. And so enforcing those entitlements is part of the backend platform that is available through the APIs, and the APIs can convey what entitlements the user has in order for the to guide the application. So if you don't have the permission to transfer from an account, then when you try to create a transfer, we won't even list that account as a potential source. You can only transfer from accounts that you have entitlements for. So managing that, the security, both at the identification, the authentication and authorization access, is critical for the APIs, but then at the back end also validating users have particular access to particular resources through a very secure, robust system. So that's a primary focus around APIs is making sure that they are fully secured. We're very aware of the OWASP API security top 10. There was a version from 2019 and a new rev of that in 2023 that provides guidance. And they've done analysis, the OWASP community, on what are the potential and most common attacks against APIs. And it's pretty well known that APIs are becoming the primary attack vector for software companies. So it used to be people would try to hack your web application, right? And try to crack into the application and then try to use SQL injection in order to try to get access to other data, et cetera. Now the hackers have learned that when there are APIs in play, that's an easier to script and automate as far as an attack vector. So people will start writing bots that try to attack the system. And so we have to build in a lot of infrastructure around that to secure that. So at Apiture, we sit on top of AWS, Amazon Web Services, which provide a lot of capabilities for both scaling your application in the cloud, but also for managing security with CloudFront and other types of capabilities that AWS provides. But we enhance that with other things as well.
That's great. So aside of the comfortable user experience and providing more and more opportunities for users to work with their finances and for businesses for providing financial services, you're actually worried about the APIs being fully protected and not being the aim of the hackers, right?
Yes, yeah, certainly. I mean, and people are aware of this. You know, they want to be able to trust not just their financial institution, but also the partners that you're working with. So we have to vet all the partners to make sure that they are also working in a secure fashion as well. But we know that people work with their monies, and in the past, people had been hesitant to, adopt financial software that was deployed in the cloud or et cetera. But we're finding now that most of our customers are familiar with and comfortable with doing online banking. And that's because we do give a very strong assurance that we're keeping it secure, that we are protecting their financial assets as best as we can. But we also want to provide them with the proper tools for them to keep their system secure too. So that could be things like multi-factor authentication, et cetera. So you're going to trust the system more if you feel that it's managing security well.
That's great. Thank you. Talking about architecture, you've already mentioned that there is like a whole strategy and some kind of a security by design philosophy when you approach creating the API solutions for fintechs. But what about the architecture itself? Would you tell us more about the importance of the robust API architecture and developer ecosystems?
Right. So architecture is very important because, and it depends by industry. Industries have different needs, et cetera. But when we talk about cloud-based banking, there is an elastic need, which is why it's a really good match for cloud and cloud elasticity in the service like AWS. For example, every month the financial institution will issue statements to their customers. Here's your banking activity over the last month. And typically the financial institution will then send an email communication to the customer saying, hey, your statements are available. What that means to us is that at the beginning of every month or at the end of every month, whenever those statements get issued, a lot of customers are going to start logging in. They're going to open up their mobile application, et cetera, in order to check their balance, check their statements, et cetera. So we need to be able to handle that level of load. And as I mentioned before, we've got a very robust architecture that's been in existence for a number of years. And so by sitting on top of AWS, we get a lot of that scalability and elasticity in order to handle those spikes in demand. So the architecture has to be able to allow lots of concurrent access, and the APIs are designed as well. With banking and customer banking, there's less issue about concurrency and contention. But when we talk about the admin APIs, if an admin is going in there and trying to update a customer record for them, say the customer calls into the financial institution and says, I need to change my my address or something like that. So we have to manage some concurrent access as well. So, but we do that through kind of standard technologies with things like e-tags and things. So within the API, you can kind of manage concurrency, but the application needs to support it in general. And by using a more stateless API approach, which is really kind of what the whole REST framework is all about, it's designed for scalability, it's designed for that web scalability. So things are less stateful. We don't rely on things like customer session data in the browser, et cetera. So everything is managed with application state in the services, and that provides a higher level of scalability. So we handle a lot of concurrent access at the front end, many customers coming in at the same time, and your architecture needs which again we get with AWS, so it handles that load very well. But the backend system has to then be able to take those requests and establish a security context, establish a user context for those requests. And when we talk about scale and APIs, et cetera, error handling is going to be an important aspect of that experience. And so we design all of our APIs to use the standard HTTP response codes. So we'll have a 400, which means a bad request. We will parse their request, and if it's syntactically incorrect, or they didn't pass in a JSON body when we expect a JSON body, we'll reject that kind of stuff very early and return a 400 level response and tell them it's a bad request. And that usually typically means that's a client programming error. So usually the clients who are developing against those APIs should be able to catch those types of things during development, during research and development of their application. But we also just check the authentication, and if the client doesn't send in proper authentication, we return a 401. If they send in authentication, but the user is not authorized to access that particular feature, or they're not authorized to access that particular resource, we'll return a 403 on forbidden or unauthorized response header. But we have lots of other things, and so we're very complete in our error handling within the APIs, and we use the application / problem plus JSON response format to convey those errors. So we use a standard representation of those errors, so it's easier for clients to be able to consume and react to those particular problems as well.
That's great. Well, yeah, that's what robustness sounds like. I actually am amazed by the amount of measures you've already mentioned to ensure that the architecture is secure and scalable enough. And I was wondering about the use cases, the case studies, I would say better. Would you mind giving some examples of the businesses that have successfully used APIs? I mean, like businesses, maybe some of your clients, like fintechs, that have implemented APIs and that actually increased their business opportunities, help them get bigger, get more clients, get more requests and stuff like this.
Right. So again, there's two sides to this coin, of the API coin that I mentioned. So one example would be, as I mentioned, Defense Storm. So they've done this direct integration with us in order to provide this fraud detection and fraud security around the banking experience. And so they're a partner of ours that is an API consumer. Sometimes the banks themselves will be consumers of our APIs because they want to build custom solutions on top of our solutions. So that's the other one. And I don't have specific numbers. I can't share that type of data with you. But the flip side of that coin is those fintech partners that have API integrations. And so we use that. So we have what's called a digital account opening solution, which allows customers to come to the bank's website and start to open up a new account. And we will use our digital account opening solution to onboard that new customer and maintain what's called a customer information program. So within banking in the United States, there are regulations around onboarding new customers to prevent fraud, to prevent other types of security issues, et cetera. So there's a lot of regulations. So the bank really has to understand and know who their customer is before they can establish a banking relationship with them. And so we employ various third parties to support that particular effort. So we have third parties that can do identity verification for customers by asking certain key information. It's similar to what you would see with credit reporting agencies or others before you open up, say, a new loan or a mortgage or something like that. They're going to help verify who that customer is and that they are who they say they are by answering certain questions that only that particular customer should know. And then we can look to make sure that that customer is not associated with any type of fraud activity or potential crimes and things like that. So we can filter out customers by integrating with third parties and using their APIs to verify customers, or if they're opening a business account, we can also verify businesses as well by using third-party APIs for that. Beyond that, we also have other integrations with many other companies. Apiture as a platform has many types of integrations for doing money management and things like that to enhance the customer's experience with banking, to help them understand their cash flow. And especially for businesses, that's very important to look at cash flow. And so we have lots of different integrations. A relatively new integration that we've added recently is with Greenlight. And in the United States, Greenlight provides debit cards for children to help families educate their children on financial management and financial health. How do you manage your own budget? So say that child has an allowance, or they receive gift money, they receive birthday checks, things like that, and then they go into their bank account, and then parents can issue a Greenlight debit card to their children and control access to say, okay, they can only use this debit card at certain types of retail establishments. And so they can control where the child can use or spend that particular money, but they can also monitor it, et cetera. So it helps families manage and learn about finances and managing their money and stuff. And that's done with lots of different integrations. So we have both API and SSO integrations, a single sign-on type integration with vendors like that to enhance the capabilities of the platform. Because at Apiture, we can't build everything, right? That's the whole idea of these APIs is someone else comes up with a really good idea and they create a startup or create a new company and build out that capability because they've identified some niche problem space and they build a solution for that. And then if it provides value to our customers, then we can add that integration. And we have a very great relationship with all of our banking customers. And so if they request certain types of capabilities and features, they can contract with us and we can build that capability out and add it to our platform and then make it available to lots of other customers. And that happens all the time at Apiture. We get lots of these customer development requests that come in on a very regular basis. And it helps us to improve the platform for all of our customers, not only the customer that contracts for that particular feature set because they want a new capability within digital banking, but then it makes it available for all of our other customers as well. And many of those are based on doing API work to solve that particular integration. So right now we're doing a lot of API work to integrate with more fintechs that primarily serve the credit union space in the United States. And so that not having as much credit union support in our platform would limit our abilities, but now we're adding those capabilities. So now we're more attractive to credit unions and so we can grow our business. And then with things like our digital account opening solution, et cetera, it helps those financial institutions grow their business. They can acquire new customers faster with lower cost and lower overhead. And it helps them grow their customer base and it helps them grow their deposit base, et cetera. And so it's a win for everybody.
That sounds great. Yeah, well, basically there are like plenty of numerous opportunities and they keep rising, and that's great. But once the new opportunities are rising, once there are new businesses and new user experience flows going through the fintech services, there must be some kind of a regulatory point that is also constantly keeps it getting updated. And I was wondering about the regulatory and compliance challenges that are arising in the
Oh, sure.
open banking initiatives?
Yeah, so we're always watching for the regulatory space. As I mentioned, the Aperture platform has been around for quite a long time. So all of the existing banking regulations we fully comply with. We understand those, and they've been incorporated into the platform. The regulatory space is relatively slowly changing in the United States. So we don't get new bank regulations that come out quarterly or things like that. So it's not that hard for us to keep up to date with those types of banking regulations. Now, things are changing faster. So you have, like as we talked about earlier, there's open banking in the EU, which basically is a new regulatory framework that I anticipate that will be moving into the United States in the future to support true open banking in the sense that it is in the EU, where there are open banking regulations that dictate how financial institutions work and how they allow interoperability and integration so that, for example, I should be able to, as a customer, get to access all the data that the bank has about me. Things like that, I think, will eventually come to the United States, but I think it's going to be a slow change because the environment in the United States is sort of anti-regulation. And so businesses kind of push back on regulation. So I think it's going to be a while before those things change. But through having open APIs, et cetera, I think it's going to set us up for success there. It'll be easier for us to support some of those data access and data openness type regulations because we do have API access. As I mentioned, we have administrative access to lots of things, and customers will be able to get to things. So we'll have to build new APIs to support it, but we've got the frameworks in place for doing that. We know how to build APIs, we know how to deliver APIs, we know how to secure APIs. And that's always going to be our first approach. As I said, API first. We want to define those APIs and define those capabilities first, and then we can build the front ends to access that, whether it's a web application or the mobile application enhancements. By going API first, we provide the vehicle for solving both of those user interface integrations, as well as other third-party or fintech integrations can all come through those APIs. So that's the key driver for having APIs, is to allow you to expose those business capabilities to multiple clients. Instead of having something that only solves one client's need, you can solve multiple client needs at the same time with one set of APIs. And that's what our real goal is with APIs, is to support regulatory changes, but also just new feature sets and new capabilities, new experiences for those customers to enrich their experience with their financial institution.
That's great. And talking about the services that are provided to customers, well, banking customers, fintech customers in general, I guess the modern world is dictating more and more personalization and customization, right? So in terms of these two things, how are open banking APIs are of great assistance?
Wow, that's a really good question. It's a tough question. Because I think a lot of what you require for things like personalization are really going to be things that are handled more on the back end, not directly through the APIs themselves. But if we want to personalize the experience for the customer, and this might be where we would then employ third-party tools to provide that analysis. So a great example of personalization would be, say there's a business customer that is banking at a bank, and they've got their business checking account, and maybe they've got a CD for longer term investment. They've got multiple CDs that expire at certain times throughout the year, and they renew them and things like that. And I mentioned earlier before about kind of doing money flow analysis and spend and things like that. So by providing open APIs, that's an opportunity for a fintech to come in and say, we can analyze your money movement, and we can look at your bills and say, you've got these recurring bills that occur every month, and this is what your projected inflow and outflow is going to be, and then provide feedback to the customer to personalize that and say, maybe you want to consider shifting some of your money from your CDs into your checking account. So when this CD expires, maybe you want to move that money into your checking account in order to meet this expected money demand that you're going to have. You're going to have all these invoices come due. So looking at history and doing kind of predictive analysis and other types of stuff, you can look at the bank's or the customer's banking history and provide a better experience and provide recommendations. Or it might be the other way around. It might be that, hey, it looks like you've got too much money in your checking account, which has this lower yield. Maybe you want to move some of that money into a CD or into a higher yield instrument at the financial institution in order to achieve your goals. You don't have a lot of bills coming due over the next 3 months. Maybe you want to move it into a high yield short-term CD or something like that. So we can make recommendations. And really that's talking about personalizing. And I mentioned like the green light integration is another example of that, where you can personalize that and say, oh, it looks like your child is kind of using their debit card to go to the movies quite a bit, and maybe you can provide alerts and things like that about usage and spend for your family members at the financial institution. So the personalization type thing is really around maximizing the customer's value. What do they really want their bank to provide for them? And by personalization, it's going to be understanding the customer and understanding how their finances change over time and giving them the information that they need to have in order to maximize their investment at the bank or maybe even outside the bank. And so with APIs, you can also do integrations with other financial providers. So you might be able to link your outside accounts and say, I've got an investment account over here, or I've got an IRA with my employer here. And then you can give a holistic view of your financial picture through one experience at your primary financial institution, at your bank or your credit union, et cetera. But you can see where you have money invested elsewhere and give you a better picture. So personalizing things would be understanding the bigger picture of where your finances are, and then giving customers advice or recommendations on how to maximize their value.
That's great. Well, I like how you provided examples of the services and businesses that are all providing the a certain level of personalization and customization. I was wondering if there are some kind of innovating products and businesses that are, let's say, API enabled with the open banking API. I mean, any more examples of such solutions?
That's a good question. I'd have to really kind of think about that. I don't have a direct answer for that one right now.
No problem, no problem. But I already like how you talked about the predictive analysis and well, basically the analysis thing in general. I was wondering if the open banking APIs are laying the background for enabling, like, say, AI services, machine learning services in fintechs. I was wondering about, I guess I'm actually stepping into the predictions and the future of the open banking initiatives, but I was wondering if we could touch ground on that topic. Do you think that open banking APIs are a perfect basis for AI-based, ML-based services?
Yeah, so that gets into a larger issue or larger area around banking, which is basically within the banking industry, there is a lot of data there. And where there's data, then there's information that can be gleaned from that data. And I can't really talk about specific initiatives at Apiture around that, but we do realize that big data and machine learning and AI-driven solutions are going to be important areas of technology to consider. And certainly an open banking framework is going to support those types of integrations and capabilities being added to a banking platform. There's some tricky issues there because when we start talking about machine learning and big data, typically APIs aren't going to be the best vehicle for delivering data at scale. There are better technologies for doing that. Really, what you want to do is the data goes into a data warehouse or into some other data schema, and then the machine learning takes place on that type of data rather than trying to go through a very thin pipe of an API. That's not really scalable, and it's not really robust enough to drive things like big data analytics and machine learning and stuff. You really need to provide that at a lower level integration directly with the data storage behind the capabilities. So
Yeah, totally agree. Also, there are plenty of considerations in terms of regulating the AI technologies, especially in the EU. So I've heard that. Well, I've actually heard from our colleague Anton, who has visited a fintech conference in the EU, that people are worried about how to enable AI in general, whether it's how much it should be regulated. So there are so many things to consider there at this point, right?
right. It's a tricky space. I'm not an expert in the AI space, but I think most of us know that AIs are somewhat non-deterministic at this point. Whether it's some things like hallucinations, et cetera. You certainly don't want an AI integrated into your banking environment and then start having it hallucinate things and or or providing advice or recommendation or perhaps even acting as an agent on your behalf and doing things that you don't expect or that you don't approve. So whenever we get to having AIs involved, we'll have to be very careful that they're not perceived as an authority or as an expert in a certain domain, especially when it comes to making recommendations about money and finances and investments and things like that. That would be a very tricky area to get into. But there could be really good experiences around those for at least suggesting things and providing access to additional resources to help customers make better decisions.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Well, as we are running out of time, I have just one more question because I'm really wondering about the emergent trends, such as PSD2 data sharing initiatives that are happening right now. Would you mind just sharing your ideas on those?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think those types of regulations will be coming to the United States um, relatively soon. I think it's going to start small. As I said, I think there's still quite a bit of resistance to regulations in general in the business community in the United States. And when you start talking about things like financial regulations, there has to be a strong driver. And in this particular case, it's really going to be a consumer-driven thing. So when we talk about PSD2 and data sharing, customers want to be able to have the freedom to take their money and move it wherever they want to, and take their information and move where they want to, or be able to know what their bank or financial institution knows about them. So I think that's going to be the first thing, and that's going to probably be the easiest lift in the United States is to be able to say, I need to be able to know what it is that you know about me. And especially when you start talking about things like these AI engines or other types of things,
Totally.
what kind of information are you using to provide your services to me? So I think giving customers that freedom to get that information, to download that information is going to be the first part. Now, how you make that accessible to customers, I don't really know. Just giving them a dump of a data set is not going to be any help to most
Totally, yeah.
consumers, right? So it has to be provided in a way that is accessible and understandable to them. And then the integration and interoperability to be able to move data from one provider to another provider, I think is going to be kind of the second thing that's going to come. Now, it's not everything is going to be possible. I mean, certainly, like my transaction history, it makes no sense for me to move my transaction history from one bank to another, because that transaction history is based on specific accounts at one financial institution. But if there are trends or other types of things, that'd be interesting to see if that's something that could be made more portable, and usable through APIs to access that data and then to be able to have a common way to import and export some
Yeah.
information between institutions, et cetera. There is a lot of interoperability in the United States. So in the past, there have been kind of standards that have been established that financial institutions support OFX is an open financial exchange standard. IFX is another one. FDX is also emerging and growing quite rapidly in the United States. So FDX is kind of the next generation or next evolution of those open financial exchange interfaces, whereby, for example, a accounting software solution like Quicken or QuickBooks can then connect to your bank in order to fetch transaction information, in order to show it within that accounting solution. So you can look at your cash flow, et cetera, from those third-party applications rather than having it all be embedded within your banking application. So those types of integrations are going to continue to grow and mature. So I worked a little bit with FDX, and they have an open API that then financial institutions can implement in order to allow a standard way of exchanging financial data between providers and consuming applications like an accounting package or something like that. And I think that's where there's the best opportunity for growth and standardization in the United States, which is certainly different from regulatory things like PSD2, but that standard API-driven approach for connecting to and exchanging financial information, and more critically, a standard way for representing consent. So how does a user grant consent to a third party to access specific accounts, and how do they manage that consent and then withdraw that consent over time? And having a standard way of doing that, I think, is going to be very important. And so FDX is making a lot of progress on those fronts as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I really enjoy and I really appreciate the level of detailization you provide in your answers. Thank you so much. It was just a great conversation, and I'm really sorry that we cannot cover some more questions. But today we've explored the topic of open banking API services and learned how it can help you scale your fintech business, banking business, you name it, actually. So it's stepping out there. We can definitely see that with the help of banking APIs and open banking APIs, there are so many opportunities uncovered. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing this insights. I would like to also thank everyone watching this podcast. I'm sure that there's definitely something you would like to have covered that we haven't done yet. But if you feel like there is a question you would like David to answer, or say we can help you answering, feel free to reach out to us. You can just reach out to David and find him on LinkedIn. Also, you can just email us at hello@yalantis.com, or go to our website, yalantis.com, and subscribe to us on LinkedIn, on YouTube. We'll be happy to answer the comments, the questions you may have. And David, wow, thank you so much for being the part of this tech leadership conversation today.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. And I do want to make sure your listeners and your viewers are aware that I also run a Substack. It's called API Design Matters.substack.com. And primarily there I talk about API design, how one goes about the process of designing APIs and evolving APIs, focusing mostly on open API. But that's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So I write about that on apidesignmatters.substack.com.
Oh, that's great. We will definitely ask for the link so that we could add it to the video description, so that people who are interested could actually go and have a look at it. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you so much too.